Tom Oar is the rock of mountain men, a quiet, no-nonsense survivalist. It seems that even the most serene spirits have limitations. Plus, long-standing viewers are re-evaluating their assumptions when Tom Oar offered a bombshell. After all, we believe the mountain men to be nothing more than a close-knit, rough-and-tumble family. Tom, on the other hand, remained silent for a long time. Then something happened. Keep your eyes peeled, your scroll finger poised, and your clickbait finger firmly pressed. Number 5, Eustace Conway, please remain with me because I have something special that you will not want to miss. Initially, there was a mutual sense of admiration. Viewers were introduced to a cast that resembled living legends rather than TV personalities when the show premiered in 2012. Tom Oar, who was already in his 70s at the time, exuded dignity, serenity, and patience. An elderly man and his wife had been self-sufficient in Montana's Yock Valley for many years. The opposite was true of Eustace. He was passionate, vocal, and frequently philosophical. He taught people how to live primitively while running Turtle Island Preserve, which was like a living museum. The contrast drew in viewers. In contrast to Eustace's ferocious intensity, Tom exuded the air of a serene woodsman. Still, it seemed like these two held each other in high regard, that they knew each other's values off camera. Would it have been true friendship when they were younger? Tom looked up to Eustace for his courage. His admiration for Eustace stemmed from the latter's resolve to preserve knowledge that had become largely obsolete. By the same token, Eustace appeared to appreciate Tom's minimalist attitude to life in the woods. Subtle fissures started to appear in that image of mutual regard as the show's popularity grew. There was a noticeable difference between Tom, who lived his ideals quietly and never sought attention or boasted, and Eustace, who became increasingly loud, focused on money and theatrical. Tom, it turns out, felt that change as strongly as the audience did. Among the initial concerns that caused Tom to halt was Eustace's increasing fixation with wealth. Fans also took note of it. In contrast to Tom's resourcefulness, he even created his own clothes and tools. Eustace started bringing up money worries in almost every episode. Tom found this strange. Remember this guy? He advocated for a life of abstinence and self-sufficiency. Rejecting the rat race and not moaning about falling behind was the purpose, wasn't it? Tom kept mum on television, but those inconsistencies were driving him crazy behind the scenes. The legal issues followed. After receiving anonymous complaints in 2012, officials from Watauga County visited Turtle Island Preserve. The structures that were discovered were built in defiance of state rules, lacking running water and lacking proper licenses. One may make the case that these inspections would have seemed intrusive to someone like Eustace, who had always opposed bureaucracy. Indeed, Eustace resisted authorities' attempts to bring things up to code rather than working with them. He resisted the system with all his might. However, this was no trivial matter of confusion about construction regulations. The result was that his favorite preserve had to close. That was a warning sign for Tom. Tom was a firm believer in teamwork. He had an uncanny knack for getting along with everyone in Montana, from neighbors to city authorities. Especially when it came to negotiable principles, he never actively sought out controversy. Because of Eustace's confrontational behavior, his refusal to compromise and work things out, Tom began to doubt that his old friend actually upheld the principles he professed to uphold. Difficulty increased. Conflicts broke out between Eustace and his neighbors. One particularly disturbing incident occurred during a confrontation with Margaret Palms, who asserted that Eustace had intruded upon her land and had even fastened her gate in the heat of passion. Reporters were informed by her that he essentially lost his mind. No longer was it merely a man protecting his property. More accurately, it appeared to be an individual who had lost the capacity for harmonious coexistence. Regarding Tom, who had always been proud of his reputation as an exemplary neighbor, I felt uneasy about that. Concerns about security at Eustace's survival course also arose. There have been multiple safety citations at Turtle Island Preserve. A frightening occurrence occurred when a spectator was partially blinded after being hit in the eye with a rock during a slingshot performance. Eustace refused to budge from his course of action, even in the face of clear risks. He was uninterested in accepting blame. Yet again, Tom began to doubt his assumptions. From what Tom could tell, the once community and simplicity championing, Eustace had transformed into a man more concerned with fame, stage presence, and opposing others who had different views. The loss of Eustace's lifelong companion and collaborator, Preston Roberts, was the most tragic illustration of this. Preston had been a constant presence at Turtle Island, lending a hand to Eustace on innumerable occasions and sharing his passion for education. However, the show completely disregarded Preston's death from liver cancer. The audience seemed perplexed. Someone so beloved should surely be honored by the program. And why was Eustace so weak when it came to paying Preston the respect he was due? Tom had no idea what it meant. It would have been reasonable for them to speak out if their friendship was really that strong. Tom had seen enough at this point. It was with a heavy heart that he continued to appear on Mountain Men. Whenever he caught a glimpse of Eustace on screen, whether it was expressing a need for funds, griping about lack of time, or pursuing initiatives that appeared more suited to television than reality, his disillusionment with him intensified. Tom didn't see life in the forest as an act. Being that way was the norm. He could have made his decisions without the aid of cameras. An audience was unnecessary for him. Furthermore, he most assuredly did not require controversy to demonstrate that he was leading a genuine life. But it seemed like the distance between Eustace and the man Tom had once adored was growing. The absurdity was acknowledged even by Eustace. In my opinion, television is awful. Thus, it is undeniably paradoxical. He still showed up, cashed the checks, and kept the act going despite that. Tom, a man who had always acted in accordance with his beliefs, could no longer ignore this conflict. Thus, Tom's connection with Eustace had subtly but surely fallen apart as the years went by, and he commemorated his 80th birthday on the program. The suspense was genuine, even though viewers may never have witnessed its resolution on screen. Tom now saw a completely different person from the one he had earlier seen, as a fellow traveler, someone who cares more about how mountain life is portrayed than how it actually is. This is the origin story of one of the most interesting unsaid feuds in reality TV history. Neither via heated arguments nor dramatic consequences, but gradually coming to terms with the fact that even when two individuals set out on the same road, they may not finish up traveling it side by side. Find out which Mountain Man celebrity really infuriated Tom Oar. He's about to spill the beans, and I can guarantee you that the first one will make you gasp for air. Stay tuned to find out who drove him to his breaking point. Count 4. Rich Lewis here. As the seasons changed and the cameras rolled, most of the mountain men on the show learned survival skills. But Rich Lewis stood out because he had been fighting for his survival stripes for a long time before the History Channel came knocking on his cabin door. As a rough and tumble mountain man, Rich wasn't merely acting, it was his life. Growing up in southern West Idaho, Rich watched his father hunt from the time he was born in January 1954. Even as a young boy, he was captivated by his father's tracking and movement techniques in the woods. I was captivated by it from a young age. It thrived. Years down the road, Rich and his wife Diane established themselves in Montana's scenic Ruby Valley, where Rich became famous for his work training a pack of hounds to pursue mountain lions. More than just another hunter, he was revered by the people. He stood guard. Speculation and anecdotes did not establish his fame. Decades of hard, rugged labor in the bush were required to earn it. Nevertheless, not everyone was a fan of Rich's on-screen persona, particularly Tom Oar, despite his extensive background in the industry. Tom Oar isn't the type to jump to conclusions. Tom, a master tanner and moccasin maker, who spent his life honing his trade in Montana's Yaak Valley, held the mountain way of life in the highest regard. Thus, Tom was genuinely impressed with Rich's 2013 debut on the show. Even though they lived on opposite sides of the state, they were both men from Montana. They were subject to the same vicious winters and the same erratic animals. And the identical culture of independence, Rich was already well known. He was already known as the defender of the people by the locals. The wildlife officials had contacted Rich in 2007 after a particularly violent mountain lion murdered 2 dogs and began to pose a significant threat to humans and cattle. Tom found that kind of credibility resonating in the actual world. Someone who didn't merely reside in the mountains but actually belonged there was what he perceived in this kindred spirit. Tom started off very impressed, but his enthusiasm faded as a feeling of calm perplexity and disappointment set in as the programs continued to air. How did Rich's plots progress? What was wrong with a lot of them? Tom has always been forthright about the show's occasional need for more drama. Producers would try to make his life look riskier than it actually is, he admitted once, since else it would be too dull. In Rich's case, though, subtle exaggeration was not an option. When it came to Rich's dogs in particular, the segment started to feel like they were caught in a never-ending cycle of dramatic overkill. This is when Tom's patience began to dwindle. In the show, Rich played the role of a master houndsman, whose life was predicated on his canine skill in pursuing and subduing dangerous animals. However, the plot remained consistent from one episode to the next. Rich would become visibly distressed whenever he lost his dogs in the forest, but he would either track them down or abandon the search in the end. Those who didn't know anything about hound hunting might have fallen for the dramatic suspense. To Tom, though, who grasped the underlying mechanics. Nothing made sense. The canines weren't merely roaming aimlessly. Radio trackers and high-tech GPS collars were fastened to their bodies. Was fully aware of their whereabouts throughout, then why all the drama? The fact that Rich's dogs seemed to be failing so frequently was even more annoying. His hounds were continually hurting or losing track of him. Even though he was introduced as a skilled lion hunter, as if you couldn't corner a bobcat. Even the most casual observers couldn't help but wonder when Rich made the absurd claim that his dogs couldn't cross a river. Actually, it was just a little stream. Furthermore, this portrayal seemed incorrect to Tom, who was aware of the extensive training and expertise required to construct a trustworthy pack. It was a complete misrepresentation of Rich's purported strengths. It appeared to completely derail it, in fact. Is it reasonable to portray someone as an expert when they are clearly not good at what they do? Tom became more skeptical as a result of the emotional manipulation that Rich used in his segments. Ruby, one of Rich's canines, was born and tragically died during the course of the show. Even while the sadness was probably genuine and reasonable, Tom seemed that the producers were trying to make the most of the situation by using slow motion views, emotional reflections, and a lengthy puppy-choosing subplot. Is this a metaphor for life? Alternatively, is it merely another effort to appeal to the emotions of viewers? Though he usually keeps to himself, Tom Oar is becoming quite outspoken now. Some of the identities he's revealing will shock you to no end. Do you want to know someone that he absolutely despised? Just hold on till you find out who's on top. Number 3, Stephen Hawke. In 2016, during the show's 5th season, Jason Hawke made his debut on Mountain Men, and many longtime viewers were confused by his appearance, entering a world previously inhabited by more subdued and unassuming survivalists. This man with several tattoos wielded blacksmithing tools like a painter. He had a fierce, passionate, bearded and tattooed appearance. His abilities to an even greater extent. Jason added a new dimension to the performance as a master blacksmith with over 20 years of expertise. Even though it piqued the interest of some viewers, the disparity caused some confusion behind the scenes, especially with Tom Oar. A seasoned member of the Mountain Men, Tom Oar wasn't your average backwoods reality TV star, you know. He was authentic, a real Blue Mountain man who had been off the grid in the merciless wilderness of Montana for a long time before television ever came knocking. He was a leather tanner, trapper, and more. Tom couldn't help but question when Jason showed there, with his impressive resume and polished skills, if he was truly talented or if he was just overly camera ready. There was nothing typical about Jason's trip to the Mountain Men cast. He learned the ropes of survival from his grandpa and dad when he was a kid growing up in Colorado. He attained his hunting license at the tender age of 15. Interestingly, he was an executive chef in Colorado for a while and has a 5th-degree black belt in martial arts. Someone might stop and think about it after reading it. How does one transition from training as a chef to making knives in a desert? Well, that's the rub. James's life was multifaceted. Following his father's unexpected death, he left a career in restaurants to pursue his dream of opening Outlaw Forge Works, a shop dedicated to his passion for bladesmithing. History Channel producers noticed this change and were on the lookout for new talent and stories to air at the time. As a result of their popular reality show, Jason became beloved by the audience in no time. His homesteading life in the Sonoran Desert with his wife Mary and daughter River was an intriguing variation on the conventional Mountain Men theme, and his blacksmithing segments were captivating to watch. After some time, Jason and his family relocated to Arkansas, where he persisted in leading an independent life. For many spectators, he embodied the perfect synthesis of time-honored techniques with cutting-edge resiliency. However, things weren't always roses behind the scenes. Reportedly, Tom Oar, whose reputation was founded on decades of true suffering and wilderness expertise, had conflicting feelings about Jason from the beginning. Reports indicate that Tom was able to recognize talent when he saw it, but he also saw warning signs. One problem was that Jason's eclectic resume, which included martial arts, cooking, and blacksmithing, felt a bit too perfect for reality TV. Was this man who claimed to have lived a life of mountain living actually lying, or had he fabricated his story for dramatic effect? It wasn't only Jason's resume that Tom questioned. The show's portrayal of him was something he questioned. For Mountain Men, survival had always meant facing danger head-on. It seems like Jason's segments were a little too staged at times. Tom routinely faced the prospect of death in the brutal winters of Montana, so scenes showing him making axes in the safety of his workshop didn't properly capture the gravity of the situation. From terrifying encounters with wild animals to terrible snowstorms and food shortages, Tom has seen it all. On the other hand, Jason appeared to live in a universe where being alive seems more like an art form than a need. Considerations of expertise and age also came into play. The exact year of Jason's birth was a matter of great debate. Some accounts placed his birth in 1962, bringing him considerably closer to Tom's age, while others placed him much younger. Something about that discrepancy bothered Tom. You got what you deserved, in his view, on the battlefield. Not by means of nebulous chronologies or exaggerated recountings. It became unclear how much of a person's wilderness lifestyle was genuine and how much was staged when their past became murky. Seeing Jason's role on the program grow also made Tom apprehensive. He supposedly saw that Jason's screen time increased in tandem with his popularity. A promotion as an experienced guide and lecturer came knocking on Jason's door out of nowhere, someone guiding viewers through the details of homesteading and wilderness survival. Tom thought that was strange. How could someone who had just gone off the grid for a short time be considered an authority when others like him had been doing it for decades? Behind the scenes, animosity was building, but it never boiled over in public. Okay, Tom? A man who exuded modest pride and genuineness believed that the performance was straying too far from its initial principles. The focus of Mountain Men was shifting from adventure to entertainment. He recognized the representation of that change in Jason. Jason wasn't at fault, he was just being himself. It was all a breach of the show's former values for Tom, who had given up fame and comfort for an authentic, wild existence. Second on the list is Morgan Beasley. Living in the forest wasn't all about gathering food and splitting wood for Morgan Beasley. Crucially, it was something far more extreme, bordering on philosophical. He did more than just evade detection. He nearly eradicated it. Unexpectedly, for someone who would go on to disappear into the Alaskan backcountry, he earned a degree in environmental science from the University of Idaho. Then he embarked on a personal journey that led him to the farthest extremities of the Alaska Range. Plus, this wasn't a short diversion from reality. Complete and nearly fanatical self-sufficiency was the foundation upon which he built his existence. Simplifying is something that many people talk about, but Morgan elevated it to an art form. Without running water, electricity, roads, or even frequent human interaction, he constructed his own makeshift dwelling by hand in order to go to his own property. He once walked more than 275 miles through one of the most punishing terrain in the United States. Nothing but himself, the mountains, and his objective. No maps, no expedited routes. In contrast to the vast majority of survivalists, Morgan's credentials actually supported his knowledge of living off the grid, rather than just being a laundry list of occupations. From woodwork to seafood processing to leading expeditions on horseback, he had done it all. Along with his years spent as a wrangler in sheep hunting camps, that experience solidified his strong bond with the land and its inhabitants. As far as he was concerned, he was flourishing, not only existing. Now we come to the important question. When your view of wilderness living borders on philosophical radicalism, how can you keep up with other wilderness experts on a show? There was a subtle but noticeable tension between Tom Oar and Morgan Beasley that revolved around that. Tom, that adored darling of the fans, originated with a distinct philosophical tradition. The woods wasn't merely a setting for an existential quest for Tom. The comforts of home, traditional ways of living persisted there, and a man might live sustainably by trapping and tanning hides without totally isolating himself from society. That was mirrored in his life in the Yako Valley of Montana. A sturdy cottage, a supportive social circle, and a way of living that managed to be both comfortable and taxing. Tom couldn't help but arch an eyebrow when Morgan swung in with his high-stakes lifestyle philosophy, which held that every day could be a matter of life and death, and that being comfortable was a show of weakness. His admiration for Morgan's determination was unwavering, of course. Tom, on the other hand, thought that being courageous was distinct from being careless. Did we really need to trek into the Alaskan wilderness with almost no supplies at all for the sake of proving a point? Was 165 miles of isolation from civilization noble, or was it merely a refusal to face reality? Tom noticed the warning signs, as did many others who watched the show. Yes, he did think it was best to be in harmony with nature, but also in the careful management of its resources. That included cutting down trees in a way that was mindful of conservation efforts, striking a balance, and holding fast to a fear of the wilderness that had been well earned through the years. Conversely, Morgan had a reputation for mindlessly downed cottonwood trees for use as horse feed, often without considering how to replenish the trees. People were irritated by that. What about Tom? Sure thing, Tom was concerned that strategy would backfire in the long run. Their divergent worldviews shone through in their daily actions as much as in their words. The terrifying 15 amp gust that Morgan had to fight through ripped the roof of his shelter and jeopardized his entire food stockpile in one unforgettable scene. Tom observed with worry rather than joy. Considering there are more prudent and secure ways to establish a living in the woods, why subject yourself to such a hardship? And that was where their disagreements originated. No personal hostility was involved. Conceptually, it was deep. A well-rounded, sustainable life, according to Tom, should be possible with the right wilderness skills. A life that still makes room for friends, community, and comfort when one has earned them. Are you, Morgan? He appeared to view those very things as adversaries. Each day was an examination to him. Each challenge served as a symbol of strength. There was no adverse consequence of being alone. We aimed for that. Their interactions with the show's camera crew and producers further highlighted their dissimilarities. Tom didn't bat an eye because he knew that reality TV inevitably included some exaggeration. On the other hand, Morgan made it appear like there was no difference between the show and real life, putting himself in harm's way now despite the availability of safer alternatives. His decision to forge ahead across frozen rivers on an inflatable raft weighing only 4 pounds is one such example. Was it a demonstration of wilderness theater or sheer resolve? Though Tom never directly said it, one couldn't help but wonder if Morgan's actions were driven by his beliefs or by a desire to be seen acting in a certain way. In 1987, Morgan went on tour to expose the irony was a subsequent consideration. After years of defying authority, Morgan finally got his bush pilot license. Despite his initial resistance, the man eventually boarded an aeroplane to continue his journeys. Tom couldn't help but express his disapproval. Was Morgan now a more evolved person, Or had he just been caught unawares? After 8 seasons, Morgan and Margaret Stern quietly ended their run on the show without any fanfare or scandal. Plus, it remained mostly unchanged in Tom's perspective. Despite their differences, he couldn't help but give Morgan the benefit of the doubt when it came to his honesty. Although Tom acknowledged that life in the wilderness might and should be challenging, he was certain that survival shouldn't entail perpetual misery, without ever being harsh on purpose. Consequently, they ended up going in separate directions, not because they were inherently opposed, but because their perspectives about the environment were drastically different. The other saw it as an opportunity to live in harmony with nature, while the first saw it as a challenge of alone and limitations. A profound and unseen chasm separates two mountain men, their ideologies. It was our long-held belief that the mountain men were a close-knit, loving family that Tom Oar destroyed. Hold on, because this list is about to get even more outlandish. My top pick is Kyle Bell. Viewers were captivated by Kyle Bell and his son Ben's charming, rustic demeanor and heartwarming father-son relationship the moment they appeared on screen in 2014 during season 3 of Mountain Men. The History Channel describes Kyle's first appearance as a father passing on the traditions of the mountain man way of life to his son. I thought it was very sweet, wasn't it? It would be the most touching thing ever to witness a father teaching his son the sacred skill of wilderness survival. Under the scorching New Mexican sun, they frequently appeared in their parks tending to herds of bison or training wild horses. Many viewers were captivated and mesmerized. However, the Bells only remained for a total of 2 seasons, consisting of 34 episodes, despite the possibility of a captivating long-term plot. Next thing you know, after season 4, they quietly and unobtrusively left the show. There was no formal farewell or explanation. He simply disappeared. Tom found other strange discrepancies in Kyle's background, for example. He stumbled into Kyle's website, which revealed that, contrary to what the show had viewers believe, he resided in Folsom, New Mexico, and not the Cimarron Valley. Was it really an error in judgment, or was this story being very meticulously plotted? Tom was unable to disregard it. After that, the buffalo problem arose. Tom was fully aware that there were no longer any truly wild buffalo shambling around New Mexico, but Kyle insisted on talking about hunting them nevertheless. Then what was actually happening? Was Kyle merely making things up to make them look better on camera? In 2016, the situation became much more unclear. After Kyle and Ben departed the show, Kyle quickly started a YouTube channel called Survival Sense, where he claimed to educate people how to survive in the outdoors. It seemed like the next logical step when written down. However, it appeared to Tom as something else entirely, a strategic shift towards online stardom. He had the uneasy sensation that Kyle had joined the show for reasons other than a genuine love of the lifestyle. Nonetheless, in order to establish a reputation for them, not long after launch, Kyle's YouTube channel and website went silent, which only served to deepen Tom's skepticism. Did Kyle ever give the mountain man way of life his all? On the other hand, was there an ulterior motive to capitalize on the image of the bearded, rugged survivalist? These suspicions evolved into something more substantial behind the scenes. Tom allegedly became increasingly irritated upon learning that Kyle had consented to the producers manipulating their portrayal on screen. The way the show had gone with Kyle's parts had left Tom unhappy, according to internet forums. The fact that Kyle appeared to be willing to go along with it, even when it felt exaggerated or outright deceptive, irritated him, and he supposedly claimed that the producers decide what happens and what is said. The mountain man's manner of life was holy in Tom's eyes. Performing it in front of the camera wasn't an act. And nobody ever did anything else with it. That clearly was not acceptable to him. This brings us to the conclusion of the video. I appreciate you tuning in. A like, a remark, and a subscription will go a long way. If you like this video, click the video that appears on your screen right now to see more exciting stories